See, it wasn't easy as I thought, until you really start diving in, to...
The world is talking again, and this time, all eyes are on Priscilla Presley. News about her has exploded across headlines, and fans everywhere can't stop whispering her name. What started as a quiet moment has now turned into loud global attention. Nobody saw this coming, many are saying, as fresh details keep pouring in. Her name is trending, hearts are racing, and questions are growing bigger by the minute. People are searching for answers, and the story feels deeper than anyone imagined. Something powerful is unfolding right now, and the world is watching closely. When the past refuses to stay buried. Priscilla Presley learned long ago that some things could not be shouted into the world. Some truths wanted to be held close, protected like fragile treasures, until the right moment arrived to let them breathe. The morning began like so many others before it. Sunlight filtered through pale curtains, casting soft shadows across the hardwood floors of her home. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Once, twice, 3 times in quick succession. She glanced at it but did not reach for it right away. When the phone rang again, this time with a call instead of a message, she set the mug down slowly and picked it up. The voice on the other end was familiar, but there was something wrong with it. Something tight and breathless. "Priscilla, have you seen it yet?" "Seen what?" she asked, her voice calm but her heart already beginning to race. "The news. It's everywhere. You need to sit down." She did not sit. Instead, she stood frozen in place, the phone pressed against her ear, listening as the voice on the other end tried to explain something that did not make sense. Words came at her in fragments. Unexpected, shocking, unbelievable. She felt the room tilt slightly, as if the ground beneath her feet had shifted without warning. Her breath caught in her throat. This could not be real. It had to be a mistake. But the voice kept talking, kept repeating the same impossible thing, and slowly, painfully, the truth began to settle over her like a heavy blanket. "I'll call you back," she whispered, and ended the call before the other person could respond. For a long moment, she stood there in the kitchen, staring at nothing. The sunlight that had felt so warm just minutes ago now seemed harsh and intrusive. The birds outside continued their singing, indifferent to the sudden chaos unraveling inside her chest. She moved slowly toward the living room, her legs feeling unsteady, her mind racing to catch up with what she had just been told. She sank into the armchair by the window, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to process the weight of it all. Priscilla Presley. The name itself had always been more than just a name. It was a symbol, a piece of history that belonged to the world as much as it belonged to her. For decades, she had carried it with dignity, had honored the legacy it represented, had protected the memories that came with it. People spoke her name with reverence, with curiosity, with a hunger to know more about the woman who had loved one of the most famous men who ever lived. But what they did not understand, what they could never fully grasp, was how exhausting it was to be a memory for other people. To have your entire life reduced to a single chapter in someone else's story. To be loved not for who you were, but for who you had once been beside. She thought about calling someone, about reaching out to find clarity or comfort, or just a voice that understood. But who could she call? Who would truly understand what this felt like? To have your private pain suddenly become public property, to have the most vulnerable parts of yourself examined and discussed by people who had no right to them. She felt exposed, raw, as if someone had opened a door she had carefully kept locked and invited the world to look inside. The afternoon light began to fade. Shadows stretched across the floor, creeping toward her like dark fingers. An untouched cup of tea sat on the table beside her, cold now, forgotten. She had not moved in hours. She had not cried, had not screamed, had not done anything except sit and breathe and try to make sense of something that refused to make sense. The silence in the room grew heavier with each passing moment, pressing down on her chest, filling her lungs until it felt like she might drown in it. She closed her eyes and let the darkness behind her eyelids swallow her for just a moment. When she opened them again, the room was almost dark. The house was still. The phone had finally stopped ringing, and in that silence, in that heavy, unbearable silence, she realized something that made her blood run cold. This was only the beginning. When silence becomes louder than words, who is left strong enough to face it? When yesterday's heartbreak returns without warning. Priscilla memory came to her without invitation, slipping into her mind like an old photograph sliding out of a forgotten album. She was young again, standing in a place that felt both exciting and terrifying. The air around her had been electric with possibility, charged with something she could not name, but could feel in every nerve of her body. She had been just a girl then, barely more than a child, with wide eyes and a heart that beat too fast whenever certain words were spoken, certain names were mentioned. She remembered the nervousness that lived in her stomach, the way her hands would shake slightly when she tried to smooth down her dress or fix her hair. She wanted so badly to be brave, to be ready for whatever was coming. But how could anyone be ready for something that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at a future you could not see clearly? "You're too young to understand what this means," someone had told her once, their voice filled with concern and caution. But she had understood. Maybe not in the way adults understood things, with their worry about consequences and their fear of mistakes. But she understood with her heart, and at that age, the heart was the only compass that mattered. She understood that she had stumbled into something enormous, something that would change the shape of her entire life. She understood that love, real love, was not gentle or easy. It was wild and consuming and demanded everything you had to give. There were moments when she questioned everything. Moments when she wondered if love was supposed to hurt this much, if it was supposed to feel like drowning while everyone around you insisted you were floating. She would stand in front of mirrors in beautiful dresses, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and she would look at herself and barely recognize the girl she used to be. Where had that curious, laughing child gone? What had she given up to become this version of herself? "Are you happy?" someone had asked her once, and she had smiled and said yes because that was what you were supposed to say. Because admitting the truth felt like betraying something sacred, something she had promised to protect no matter the cost. But happiness was complicated. It was not one thing, but many things layered on top of each other. There were moments of pure joy, moments when his hand found hers and everything else disappeared. Moments when his voice softened just for her, when his eyes saw her instead of the world. Those moments were real and precious and worth every ounce of pain. But there were also moments of crushing solitude, moments when she felt like a ghost haunting her own life, invisible even to the person she loved most. Years passed. She grew older, stronger, more certain of who she was beneath the weight of that famous name. She found herself again, slowly, carefully, like piecing together something that had shattered. She learned to stand on her own, to define herself beyond the shadow of someone else's light. The pain did not disappear. It never really does. But it transformed into something else. Wisdom, courage, a quiet knowing that she had survived things that should have broken her. But then came this morning. This strange, unsettling morning when the past reached out and grabbed her by the throat. The news, whatever it was, had torn open something she thought had healed. Old wounds that she had carefully tended and bandaged suddenly felt raw again, bleeding in ways she did not understand. The phone calls, the whispers, the terrible revelations, they all pointed back to a time she had worked so hard to make peace with. And now that peace was shattered, scattered like glass across the floor, cutting her with every step she tried to take. She sat in the growing darkness of her living room, the silence pressing against her ears until they rang with it. Memories swirled around her like ghosts, each one pulling her deeper into a past she had tried to leave behind. Why now? Why, after all this time, did these old aches return with such force? She had done everything right. She had honored the memories, protected the legacy, carried the weight with dignity. She had earned her peace. But life, it seemed, did not care what you had earned. It took and took and took until you had nothing left but the breath in your lungs and the stubborn refusal to give up. Priscilla closed her eyes and let herself sink into the chair. The weight of decades pressed down on her shoulders. She felt every year, every choice, every sacrifice. The girl she had been seemed so far away now, so impossibly young and naive. If she could go back, would she do it all again? Would she still step into that bright, terrifying world if she knew what it would cost her? She did not have an answer. Not anymore. The room grew colder. The shadows deepened. And somewhere in the distance, she could almost hear the echo of her younger self, laughing without knowing what was coming, loving without understanding the price. That laughter haunted her now. Why do old wounds begin to ache again when they should have healed? The moment before, everything shatters. The morning had brought chaos, but the afternoon brought something worse. A slow, creeping dread that wrapped around her like cold fingers. She sat at the dining table, her hands folded in front of her, staring at a piece of paper that had arrived in an envelope with no return address. The words on it blurred together, but their meaning was crystal clear. This was not just news. This was a demand, a choice, a fork in the road that would determine everything that came after. She read the words again, slowly, trying to find some loophole, some way to make them mean something different. But they remained stubbornly the same, unchanging, unyielding. "You don't have to respond right away," a voice had told her over the phone earlier, trying to sound reassuring but failing. "Take your time, think it through." But how much time did she really have? How long could she sit with this weight before it crushed her? The decision sitting in front of her was not the kind you could make with logic or careful planning. It was the kind that mandated you to reach deep inside yourself and figure out who you were at your core, what you stood for, what you were willing to sacrifice, and what you refused to lose, no matter the cost. She stood up from the table, unable to sit still any longer. Her legs carried her through the house without direction, moving from room to room as if searching for something she could not name. The hallways felt longer than usual, stretching endlessly before her. Her footsteps echoed off the walls, each sound sharp and lonely in the quiet house. She passed closed doors, each one hiding a memory, a moment, a piece of the life she had built. Behind one door was the room where she had cried herself to sleep more times than she could count. Behind another was the space where she had laughed until her sides ached, back when laughter came easily. Every daughter held something, and walking past them felt like walking through her own history. She stopped in the hallway, her hand resting on the cool wall, and closed her eyes. She could feel the pressure building around her, invisible but suffocating. There were people waiting for her decision, people whose lives would change depending on what she chose. There were consequences lurking in every direction, ready to pounce the moment she made a move. And somewhere beneath all of that was her own heart, beating frantically, begging her to choose wisely, to choose carefully, to choose in a way she could live with. The truth was, she had known this moment was coming. Maybe not consciously, but somewhere deep inside, she had felt it approaching like a distant storm on the horizon. The news that had broken this morning was just the beginning, just the first crack in a dam that was ready to burst. Behind that crack was everything. Years of secrets, unspoken agreements, carefully maintained silences. And now someone was threatening to break it all open, to let the flood rush through and wash away everything she had worked so hard to protect. "You've always been stronger than you think," someone had once told her during a dark time. She had not believed it then. She had felt weak, unbreakable, like glass that could shatter with the slightest pressure. But over time, she had discovered that strength was not about never breaking. It was about breaking and somehow finding a way to piece yourself back together. It was about standing up even when your legs shook. It was about speaking even when your voice trembled. It was about choosing love over fear, even when fear felt safer. She walked to the window and looked out at the world beyond the glass. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. People were driving home from work. Children were playing in yards. Life was continuing as if nothing had changed. But inside this house, inside her chest, everything was different. The world she had known was teetering on the edge of transformation, and she was the only one who could decide which way it would fall. The whispers had started quietly, so quietly she almost missed them at first. Conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Glances exchanged between people who thought she was not watching. Phone calls taken in hushed tones behind closed doors. She was not supposed to know what was being discussed, but she always knew. You could not hide tension like that. It seeped through walls and lingered in the air like smoke. She had learned long ago to read the spaces between words, to understand what people meant by what they refused to say. Now those whispers had grown louder, more insistent. They had become demands, ultimatums, lines drawn in sand that the wind threatened to blow away. And she was caught in the middle, expected to make a choice that felt impossible. On one side was loyalty, history, the weight of promises, made in different times. On the other side was truth, integrity, the kind of honesty that burned but also healed. Both paths led to pain. Both paths mandated sacrifice. Neither offered any guarantee of peace. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window and felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had cried so many tears in her life, enough to fill oceans. But these tears felt different. They were not born of sadness or loss. They were born of frustration, of exhaustion, of the sheer impossibility of making everyone happy while still honoring yourself. How did you choose between hurting others and betraying your own soul? How did you navigate a situation where every option felt wrong? You'll know what to do when the time comes, another voice echoed in her memory, gentle but certain. Trust yourself. But what if she did not trust herself? What if she made the wrong choice and could not take it back? What if her decision destroyed the very thing she was trying to protect? Fear wrapped itself around her ribs, squeezing until breathing felt difficult. She wanted to run, to disappear, to wake up and find this had all been a terrible nightmare, but she could not run. She had never been the running type. Even when running would have been easier, she had stayed. She had faced what wanted to be faced. She had done what wanted to be done. The house settled around her, creaking softly as the temperature dropped with the fading light. She moved away from the window and walked back through those long hallways, past those closed doors, until she reached the room where the envelope still lay on the table. The paper seemed to glow in the dim light, demanding her attention, refusing to be ignored. She sat down again, her hands trembling slightly as she picked it up one more time. Time slowed. The clock on the wall ticked with agonizing precision, each second stretching into eternity. Her breath caught in her throat, held suspended between one heartbeat and the next. The world outside continued its noise and movement, but in this room, in this moment, everything was perfectly, terribly still. She could hear her own pulse pounding in her ears, could feel the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders, could sense the future hovering just beyond her reach, waiting to see what she would do. Her hand moved toward the phone, then stopped, then moved again. Her fingers hovered over the buttons, hesitating, second-guessing, questioning everything. This was it. This was the moment. Once she made this call, once she spoke the words that were forming on her tongue, there would be no going back. The door would open. The truth would walk through. and nothing would ever be the same. She closed her eyes and took one deep, shaking breath. What happens in the quiet second before a truth finally crashes through the door? The strength that remains when everything else falls away. Priscilla had always been more than what people saw on the surface. She was not just a name attached to history or a face frozen in photographs from decades past. She was a woman who loved fiercely, who hurt deeply, who carried burdens that would have broken lesser souls. Her kindness was not weakness. It was a choice she made every single day, even when the world gave her every reason to become bitter and cold. She believed in second chances, in the power of forgiveness, in the possibility that people could grow and change if given the space to do so. Her heart had been bruised and battered by life, yet somehow it still opened for others. She still saw beauty in small moments. She still found reasons to smile, even when tears were closer to the surface. That was who she was at her core, a woman who refused to let pain turn her into something unrecognizable. The storm had passed. Not quickly, not easily, but it had passed. The phone had finally stopped ringing with its incessant demands. The voices that had filled her home with urgency and panic had faded into memory. The decision that had felt impossible just hours ago had been made, and now she sat in the aftermath, feeling the strange emptiness that comes after crisis. It was the kind of quiet that felt almost too heavy, the kind that made you aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every small sound that usually went unnoticed. She was exhausted, not just physically, though her body ached with a tiredness that went bone deep. She was exhausted emotionally, spiritually, in all the ways a person could be worn down by living through something that demanded every ounce of strength they possessed. She sat in her favorite chair as darkness settled over the house completely. The room was lit only by a single lamp in the corner, casting soft shadows that danced gently across the walls. Her hands rested in her lap, still and calm now, though they had trembled for hours. She stared at nothing in particular, letting her mind wander through the landscape of everything that had happened. The news that had shattered her morning, the memories that had pulled her back into painful history, the choice that had threatened to tear her apart. All of it felt distant now, like it had happened to someone else in some other lifetime. "You did the right thing," she whispered to herself, testing the words, seeing if they felt true. They did not feel triumphant or certain, but they did not feel wrong either. They felt like acceptance, like the gentle surrender that comes when you realize you cannot control everything, and sometimes doing your best has to be enough. She thought about forgiveness then, not the kind you give to others, but the kind you must give yourself. That was always the hardest kind. It was easy to be angry at yourself for not being perfect, for not knowing everything in advance, for making choices that hurt even when you were trying to help. But perfection was a lie, a trap that kept you prisoner to impossible standards. She had spent too many years already punishing herself for being human, for having limits, for not being able to save everyone from pain. Tonight, in this quiet moment, she decided to let that go. She decided to forgive herself for being flawed, for being tired, for not having all the answers. The headlines would tell their version of events. They always did. They would reduce complex emotions to simple words, turn nuanced decisions into sensational stories, make judgments from the outside about things they could never truly understand. But Priscilla knew something they did not. She knew that she was more than whatever they wrote about her. She was more than the breaking news, more than the scandal, more than the drama that people consumed with their morning coffee. She was a woman who had loved and lost, who had raised a child with grace under impossible circumstances, who had stood beside greatness without losing herself entirely, who had survived decades of public scrutiny and private heartbreak, and somehow emerged still capable of kindness. "They don't know who you really are," a dear friend had told her once years ago, when another storm had threatened to consume her. "They see pieces, fragments. But they don't see the whole picture. They don't see your heart. That was true then, and it remains true now. The world saw what it wanted to see. A legend, a mystery, a woman forever connected to a name that would never die. But they did not see the quiet moments. They did not see how she tended to her garden with patient hands, how she listened to music that made her cry, how she called old friends just to hear their voices, how she fought through dark days with nothing but stubborn hope, keeping her upright. They did not see the real woman, the one who existed beyond the spotlight and the stories. She felt something shift inside her then, something loosening and releasing. It was hope, fragile and new, like the first green shoot pushing through hard earth after a long winter. She had survived this. She would survive whatever came next. The road ahead was uncertain, marked by questions she could not yet answer and changes she could not predict. But she would walk it anyway, one step at a time, with whatever strength she could gather. Healing was not instant. It was not a switch you flipped or a destination you reached. It was a process, slow and sometimes painful, that mandated patience with yourself and faith that things could get better. She had healed before. She would heal again. The scars would remain. They always did. But scars were proof of survival, evidence that you had faced something terrible and lived to tell about it. She thought about legacy then, about what she would leave behind when her time on this earth was finished. She did not want to be remembered only for the scandals, only for the headlines, only for the ways other people had defined her. She wanted to be remembered for her dignity, for her grace under pressure, for the way she had taken blow after blow and refused to stay down, for the love she had given even when it was not returned, for the strength she had found in her weakest moments. That was the legacy she hoped to leave. Not perfection, but honest, hard-won survival. "You are stronger than you know," someone had written to her in a letter she kept tucked away in a drawer. She pulled it out now, reading those words again by lamplight. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was stronger than she gave herself credit for. Maybe survival itself was a form of victory, even when it did not feel glorious or celebrated. The night deepened around her. The world outside her windows slept, or continued its restless movement, indifferent to her small corner of struggle and triumph. But here, in this room, in this moment, she felt something like peace beginning to take root. It was fragile, this peace. It could be disrupted easily, but it was real, and it was hers, and for tonight, that was enough. She would wake up tomorrow and face whatever wanted facing. She would answer the calls that still wanted answering. She would continue the work of living, of being, of trying to do right in a world that often felt impossibly complicated. But tonight, she would rest. She would let herself breathe without urgency. She would honor the woman she had been and the woman she was becoming. The lamp flickered slightly, drawing her attention. She watched the shadows dance and thought about all the versions of herself she had inhabited over the years. The young girl full of dreams, the woman learning what love costs, the mother protecting her child, the survivor rebuilding from ruins. All of them were still inside her somewhere, layered like pages in a book, each chapter contributing to the whole story. She closed her eyes and felt the exhaustion pulling her towards sleep. But before she surrendered to it, she let one final thought settle over her like a blanket. She had done her best. She had chosen courage over comfort. She had protected what mattered most. And whatever judgment came, whatever people said or thought or decided, she knew in her heart that she had acted with integrity. That knowledge would have to be enough. The house settled into its nighttime rhythms around her. The clock ticked steadily. The world turned. And Priscilla Presley, woman of strength and sorrow and surprising grace, allowed herself to finally rest. When the headlines fade away, what truth is left beating inside the heart?